When we get to it costing 30 cents per kilo per 100 kilometers in terms of that end-to-end delivery cost, then we will have disrupted aeroplanes, helicopters, ships, boats, HGVs, and we're really starting to eat into large panel van costs. That, Belden, is a total game changer.
Hi, I'm Belden Mankus. Welcome to the Purposeful Strategist, the podcast that shifts the conversation about purpose and strategy from what organizations should do to what business leaders are doing and what they've learned along the way. My guest today is Simon Thompson, Group CEO of Windracers. Windracers is at the cutting edge of autonomous aviation, focused on using self-flying low-cost drones for humanitarian aid and logistical challenges. Simon, welcome to the Purposeful Strategist podcast.
And good morning, Belden. It's lovely to speak to you today.
I wonder, just kind of get us going, if you could share a bit about your background and what drew you to Windracers, and maybe also give us a quick overview of sort of size and shape of Windracers today.
Yeah, so Belden, I'm a restless innovator. I love things that are new. I love things that are difficult. And I think I've always reflected in myself that I like to run towards fire, for want of a better phrase. I've done many, many things in my career. I'm a computer scientist by trade, but whether working for Apple or setting up Morrison's Online, doing some board support work at Coca-Cola, and also I ran Royal Mail very recently as well, and had some experience in government during COVID. And what led me to Windracers was when I was sat as a CEO of Royal Mail, there were three businesses that I thought could really transform the world for better, and Windracers was one of them.
When you say transform the world for better, what kind of might that mean?
So we'll start with some factual statistics. You know, it's been pretty much proven that a 1% increase in air cargo connectivity is associated with, 6% plus increase in total exports and imports in a country. And we know that a 10% increase in air connectivity actually boosts labor productivity and GDP. Simplistic way of looking at it, if people can get what they need, they can do the things that they need. And if they can't get the things that they need, they can't.
Right. That's interesting. And so just before we get into kind of Windracers properly, if you think about your own career, what lessons have you carried forward into Windracers? And particularly, how do they shape your approach to purpose and strategy today?
Yeah, well, I think my experiences in my career is that, of course, we need to make a shareholder return, because without that, we don't get the money to do the things that we want. But what really motivates people is how they feel about things. And my experience of human beings is if they feel good about doing something for others, that is a force that you actually can't hold back.
Mm-hmm. Over the last few years, we've heard a lot about drones and how they're going to revolutionize delivery. But so far, it seems like it's been slow progress. Maybe I've not noticed it, but it seems like it's been. What's the difference about Windracers' Ultra vehicle? And you might need to describe that a little bit. And what should we be expecting over the next few years?
We'll start from an industry perspective to start off with. The technology is now ahead of the regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important place to start, is that the progress is no longer being throttled back by a lack of technical ability. It's been throttled by regulation, who are protecting what they would see as something that could put society at risk. So the way that this all accelerates, which is now starting to happen, we can see it. I think there was only just the other week, they were doing NHS sample deliveries between hospitals in London, where they were reducing the cycle time from hours to literally minutes. I think as soon as the society realizes the benefits that can be brought, I think that what will happen is society will put regulation, and then the technology is already ready. So that's the sort of industry perspective. I think from Windracers' perspective, what we're really focused on is disrupting the middle mile of logistics. That's, deliveries from sort of 50 kilometers up to 500 kilometers. I think a lot of the other players in the market are really focused on the final mile. So that means that, when we are doing our connections from community A to community B, we're not doing it over the middle of, city conurbations. We're doing it where we're replacing, helicopters, planes, ships, HGVs, not someone walking down the street doing a delivery. So I think that's a very, very, very different take on it. We know that particular part of the market from a logistics perspective globally is worth around about 300 billion. It's an absolutely huge market. And we also know that there's 850 million people in the world actually live offshore. And if you're living offshore, then actually getting what you need is something that's not so straightforward. And why is it that if you live offshore, should you get less of an experience as a human being than if you actually live onshore?
So what, from a technology standpoint, what are you bringing to the party that makes that work? If I could put it this way, what's the magic about what you've got?
Well, what's magical, Belden, it's such a tremendous story, is that in a laboratory in 2017 at Southampton University, there were some people that got together and went, why is it in Africa that it's hard to get food aid to people? And when they problem solved that, they went, well, actually, the best way to get to people, because we can't get there via roads, is to actually fly there. The issue with flying there is if you're doing it with a pilot or you're doing it with a traditional aircraft, it's expensive. So what they developed was a long-range self-flying cargo aircraft, which they call the Ultra. And Ultra stands for uncrewed, low-cost transport. And these were ideas that were developed in 2017. So they developed a 10-meter wingspan, self-flying cargo aircraft that can fly 1,000 kilometers, can carry 100 kilograms of payload, around about 700 liters, which is around about the space in the back of a reasonably big-sized SUV, and actually has the capability of dropping as well as delivering, because on the bottom of the platform, it does have some drop doors, so you could actually drop high calorific bars to children in Africa that actually need to be fed. So that's the magic. So the magic is a self-flying cargo aircraft.
So just so I understand, when you say self-flying, does that mean that it takes off, navigates, lands, there's no human controlling it remotely? It sounds like it's AI, maybe it's not, but it sounds like all the smarts are on the device. Is that the way it works, or is it something else?
Belden, I think that's a beautiful summary. I think you've summarized it beautifully. Yes, of course, we are still in contact with the platform, so we can still control it or do an intervention if we need.
Right.
And, we opened up a faculty at Purdue University around about 6 months ago who are actually working on making the AI autopilot even better. And at the moment, it takes a couple of operators to fly one platform, but what we're shooting for is one operator flying 10 platforms. And at that point in time, we no longer have a human restriction. It massively drives down the cost of, doing these delivery to people that really need it. And then we definitely become the low-cost champion that disrupts the industry, which I guess probably best summarizes, our claim to the market.
Yeah. And you talked a bit about regulation. I can see how that's clearly an issue. There's almost sort of two things I'd be interested in exploring there. One is, what you're doing, is it sort of outside the air traffic control system, or is it putting load on that system? Because I think those of us who travel know every now and then that system sort of gets overloaded and there's a bit of a problem. So is it in or out that? And then I guess the other is part of Windracers' strategy to shape policy? And if so, how are you doing that? Or is it more, we think the regulation is going to change, we just need to position ourselves for when it happens?
Yeah, so two great questions, Belden. I'll pick them up in order there. So the thing about the sky is it's nowhere near as congested as the roads. You don't have potholes, and it's incredibly well regulated. There's clear separation between aircraft. There are clear policies and procedures in place. I mean, it's interesting for me, Belden, because I'm trying to learn to fly, doing my PPL, because I really want to understand the realities of the sky versus the road. And the first thing that really strikes me is there's plenty of space up there. Now, your comment around, are we going to be working in a space where there is other traffic? Yes, we are. We are actually not trying to avoid what is actually going on. We are working on making sure we work in harmony. Even just over the last few days, I've been doing an awful lot of testing up in the Orkney Isles, and we're actually at the point now of commercializing those routes, which means that we will fly in harmony with passenger aircraft. And the actual problem to solve is not to separate us, is to get us to work together in harmony. So then that means that the world is really open to do whatever that we need to do. I think historically there'd always been a focus to fly when others weren't flying. I don't think that really solves the problem. I think the way you solve the problem is you work together with the current reality to find a way of being in harmony. And then that rolls onto your second point around, are we shaping the regulation? We're absolutely shaping the regulation. And I have to say, Belden, it's been quite interesting for me, is that, working with the CAA directly, I think their appetite to really use these technologies for the good of the population is incredibly high. Now, of course, they have to keep people safe. We want to keep people safe. Everyone wants to keep people safe, right? But I would argue that, flying one of our self-flying cargo aircraft over the sea, connecting communities in the Orkney Islands, I don't think that's an unsafe reality. But working with the CAA, and I imagine that hopefully we'll have some news fairly soon, I think that we will be shaping the regulation with the CAA, and I believe that everybody will be able to get what they want in a timeline that's much shorter than they currently get and at a significantly lower cost.
So you've talked about economic growth, you've talked about humanitarian aid. How do you translate that into strategy, and how do you balance the sort of commercial realities with any humanitarian aspirations?
Well, we are definitely at the point where we're crossing the commercial chasm. We're no longer an organisation that's testing and trialling. I have to say a big thank you to UKRI and lots of other, institutions that have funded an awful lot of research along the journey. But we are actually at the point now where the product works. We're a combination of hardware, software, and also the operations piece as well. Our business does the whole piece end to end. But we are now at a point of commercialization.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the operations piece. So technology, I think I get, but what's the operations piece?
Well, they have to land, they have to take off, and you have to orchestrate that whole operational reality of getting cargo into the platform and then making sure that it will take off and fly. It needs to be maintained, it needs to be fueled, and it needs to have all of those other operational realities that are required.
Just taking the Orkneys as an example, would you anticipate you've sort of got a center at one end or the other of the link and you do all that at that end? So it's got to get there and back and then you can service it? Or is it, no, we'll be able to deal with all the operational bits at either end kind of independently?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the model plays out, particularly with the human interaction. If you take the Orkney Islands as a for instance, I'm doing this from memory when I was there yesterday, but I think their population that lives offshore is around about 10,000 people. So it's a pretty significant size of population that, they live across multiple islands. At the moment, it can take 3 to 5 days to get something. At some times of the year, they might only have, one ferry or one plane a week. So I think to be able to do a daily service there and back, I think is totally transformational for them. I think what will be interesting, Belden, is when we get the service up and running, is what actually happens when the aircraft lands and who takes the parcels or the medical supplies or whatever else it might be out the back of the airframe. I think it will be really interesting to work that through operationally. I think that will end up giving us some great insight into how the model will evolve over time.
Sorry, Simon, you're obviously deep in the midst of doing this, so I'm asking you a whole lot of questions like you had it all worked out, but I could see two sort of different models. One is, well, we're going to have someone, and when the vehicle lands, they know how to deal with it. A much more exciting one is, I've ordered a package. I get a text message that says, your package is here. Please get over to wherever it's landed. Walk up to the vehicle, take my package out and go off. Between those two, where are you aiming for?
Well, I think it would be great, Belden, to get to a self-service model because I think that's ultimately scalable. And I think the thing to bear in mind is that the actual cargo door is like opening up the hatchback car. From that operational perspective, I think that is really, really straightforward. But what we need to do is we need to work with the local communities to see what is acceptable to them and what is also safe. But how these models evolve over the time will be a real fascination. And of course, what we see in Africa for delivering food aid, then we don't land at all. What we do is we'll drop that aid with parachutes with a real high degree of accuracy so that they can access what they need that way as well. So I think that it could be all of those things that you've described. I don't think that we should be, totally set on one option versus another option. It will evolve over time. But fundamentally, the self-service model at the point of destination is the ultimate scalable model.
What's sort of the landing and takeoff requirements? Is this the sort of thing you could do it almost anywhere if they've got a level field, or do you need paved roads? How does all that work?
Sand, grass, gravel, a runway.
Really?
Yes, really. Yes, really.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah.
So we don't need a huge long runway. We need a relatively short piece of runway as well. So its operational window and capability of being able to land wherever it needs to land is really high. And actually in Purdue University, we're building I call it an airfield. It's actually a field.
Just right? Building a field.
Well, it's an area of agricultural land that's getting flattened, and then we're going to seed it, and there'll be a structure on the end of it. Mm-hmm. So it's got somewhere to be kept when it's not in use, with a generator, relatively low fidelity reality, and then we are off and running.
That does sound really interesting. So how long have you been the CEO there then?
Well, I've been here about 6 months now, Alan, so I'm actually very, very new. So it almost feels in some ways inappropriate to talk about it today, but I can certainly give a fresh perspective to it. What I must say is that an awful lot of the team that are still there today actually developed this back in 2017, and they're still with the mission. They're still living their dream. And I think that commercialization is now super close. So I think it's going to be great to see the look in their eyes when they realize that what they dreamt to University Lab in Southampton is actually doing exactly what it is designed to do, but in a sustainable way in terms of it becomes a real business generating real profits.
It sounds like in the 6 months you've been there, sort of bringing the mission, the purpose, and the commercial reality together. How have you done that? What's the process been? What were the key decisions? Who were the stakeholders involved?
Well, you're right, Bill, and you've described exactly what I've been focused on, which is how do we cross this commercial chasm? But it certainly wasn't me, because the business had plenty of momentum before I arrived. So, what have I added, to the equation? Well, we've now got a very, very clear business plan. We've got a clear economic goals that we need to deliver. We've cascaded or starting to cascade those realities to the team and form them in a way so they can really deliver what is required to cross this commercial chasm. And of course, I had my background in logistics very recently, a real good understanding of the customer need and what is required to deliver it. So that's what I've brought to the team. So I think I would say that I've added some commercial expertise. I think I've added absolutely zero expertise to making it fly magically. I think they'd figured that out quite nicely. It's an interesting transition point now, because we are going from magic to logic. We've had the magic of the dream, the automation, building something that can really do this task. That's the magic. And we're now doing the logic, which is how do you turn that into a real business that is investable, that's sustainable, and that can really bring a disruptive commercial reality to the market. That, in essence, is where we're at.
Yeah. One of the tensions, I think, that exists for organizations that start with a purpose, start with a mission, is kind of how do you navigate through that and keep the people who came for the purpose happy with the mission? And also, often organizations that are mission-led are quite happy to have lots of other people doing what they're doing. Whatever they're doing, they think is good. And if more people are doing it, that's even better. Commercially, you often don't want competitors. Do you have competition? What does it look like? How do you think about them? Is it great we're all on this mission to get this, logistical connections to everywhere in the world, and if you have a lot of it and we have some of it, that's fine? Or is it now world domination? We have to be the only people. How do you navigate through all that?
So the first thing you talked about was the team. and, it's clearly a change that's happening. And how do you keep that team on board that joined for the purpose when things are changing? Well, clearly we are adding people to the team. And I think the thing that is really important here is that when we introduce new skills and experiences to the team, it has to be additive, not dilutive, which means that they have to believe that the mission is still a good mission. They might bring some new commercial expertise or a new set of experience, whether it's regulation or commercialism or sales or marketing or whatever else it might be, but they still have to believe that the mission is worth doing, because you can't add in the new skill set and infect the purpose. That's not allowed. But yes, of course, there are new personality types that arrive almost every day now. So I think the rule of it is it has to be additive, not dilutive. Even if you are bringing in a new set of skills and experiences within your heart, you've got to believe that the purpose is still valid. So that's sort of the first part of your question. The second part of your question around competition. I mean, it was interesting. I was just as you were saying that to me, I was actually thinking during my times doing online grocery. I took Morrison's online. My experience of that category is the more players in that category, the faster that the industry grew. So I think it's an interesting balance here, is that this is not just about only Windracers using this technology to connect people to what they want. We actually need quite a few players in the industry connecting people to what they want, because then it looks an awful lot more normal. The society will go, well, this is actually okay. There's a few people doing it. Now, back to your other point, Belden, would we like to be the first one pioneering, taking a disproportionate market share with our elbows out? Yes, of course. Of course we would. But again, if you go back to, what happened with Tesla, Tesla gave a lot of their patents away to the rest of the industry right at the start of the electric car revolution, because they understood that actually having more players in the industry was going to grow the industry faster than if they did it on their own. And I think that's a really good lesson to learn there. So when we look at improving regulation with the regulators, we don't turn around and say we just want it for us. Of course, we want to pioneer it. Of course, we want to shape it. And of course, that's good for us. But we do also understand that it'll be good for others. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great way to look at it. What advice would you give to other CEOs who are aiming to kind of integrate purpose with their organizational strategy?
Make sure that your purpose can make money. If you are a commercial organization, that's it.
One of the big messages that I've gotten from the various interviews I've done is, if you've got a purpose and you're a business, make sure your business model drives naturally to the purpose. It's not a distraction. It's not in conflict. The more you do your business, the more you're delivering your purpose.
I think that's right, Bill. That's a great summary. I mean, the team that we have want to make sure that we can connect communities. The business mission is bringing prosperity to those that need it. I think it's an absolutely beautiful vision. Right? What we're now working on is a business model to make that self-sustaining so we can do that even more. So the two are absolutely not in conflict. The two are perfectly aligned.
Anything else you'd like our listeners to know about? Anything I haven't asked you about that maybe I should have?
Well, Bill, just one thing, just on the topic of purpose, because this actually happened yesterday. So there was a news release just went out the other day, which is Aviation Sans Frontières and Windracers sign an agreement for humanitarian aid delivery by drone in Africa. So why do I want to pick up on this particular point? Mm-hmm. Because organizationally, we have had so much success over the last period of time. Whether it's COVID test kits, whether it's doing research in the Antarctic with the British Antarctic Survey, whether it's supporting what is happening in Ukraine, the first ever landing of a fixed-wing drone on an aircraft carrier, and. The list is so long. But this news of actually having an agreement with Aviation Sans Frontières to deliver humanitarian aid is the thing that really lit up the organization. And I think it's a fascination to me because, of course, when people started on this journey, this is what they wanted to do. And all of the other things are great, by the way, and all the other things are going to help the whole commercialization of the business. But for the people, The perfect manifestation of the purpose has really arrived. And that for them is living their dream. And that for them is an incredibly powerful force.
I mean, clearly the potential of that is really amazing. But is there a little nagging worry that people might think, job done?
Well, you need to come and meet the team.
I'd love to.
You need to come and meet them, because I struggle to see anything in them that says job done. And I think if you look at the purposes of, how many parts of the world that could benefit from connectivity of what they want at a really low cost in, a very short period of time versus their current reality, I think job done is a long way down the road. I think it's a long way down the road, but this is a great step.
Yeah. You've sort of mentioned this, 100 kilograms, 1,000 kilometers is the primary thing now. Let's get more of those links and more craft working. Or is it, it needs to be 200 kilograms and 2,000 kilometers, or I don't know, 100 kilometers and 10 kilograms. Is the product sort of the same? We just need to get more of it out there. Or are you also thinking expand the product range?
Our range and our payload capability is definitely a key differentiator and a big competitive advantage.
Yeah.
So I think doing what we do more often is definitely the short-term focus. Now, picking up on your point, Belden, should it be 200 kilos versus 100 kilos? We'll just fly two.
Right.
We have the swarm technology. We already have the technology where they can operate in unison. So I'm not worried about the 100 kilos piece. If it's 1,000 kilos, we'll fly 10. The thing that we really need to focus on now is doing what we do more often and rapidly driving down the cost of what we do by a lower cost platform, making that platform more efficient, improving our operations, because that's where the real disruption comes. Because what we're doing is we're bringing a capability that is new at a price point that everyone can afford. And that's when the market really expands. And that's when you're in a situation where there are no limitations on getting what you want quickly.
So this may get slightly too detailed and technical, but I can't resist asking. So what's that price point? What is that in your head that you feel you've got to get to? And where are you now?
Well, when we get to, not if we get to.
Yeah, when? I'll buy that.
When we get to it costing 30 cents per kilo per 100 kilometers in terms of that end-to-end delivery cost, then we will have disrupted aeroplanes, helicopters, ships, boats, HGVs, and we're really starting to eat into large panel van costs. That, Eldon, is a total game changer. We are not at that cost today, but my feeling is it is maybe 18 months away, maybe a little bit longer. And at that point in time, the whole cost reality has gone. And that's when the disruption really starts. And just as an example, Eldon, if you can imagine in Africa, in developing markets, logistical costs are 8 times what they are in developing world. It's actually morally, my personal view, not right that it's cheaper to get fresh food in, say, New York versus some places in Africa because of the logistical reality. But I mean, imagine a world where the costs are so low that you can get what you need in a way that is very, very quick and efficient. I think that market just totally explodes. But I mean, I don't mind sharing the end game. But again, if we have a look at the realities of what we're disrupting today, the cost of a helicopter flying for an hour or a plane flying for an hour or a ship for an hour versus where we are today, we are so competitive today versus that reality.
Already.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Anything you'd like to ask me?
I have actually, Belden. Having listened to me talk, what's different in your view of what we're doing versus perhaps what you've heard elsewhere, or is it the same?
Simon, I point to a couple of things, and I don't think it's so much what you're trying to do. The thing that really is stuck in my head and I really love is the way you've connected it, almost from the first few words we talked about, to economic growth, to people being able to both get what they need, what they want, so sort of to have a happier, better, more satisfying life, but equally that they then have a way to take out into the world whatever the unique, special thing they have to offer is. Sort of 800 million people offshore. I read that as not having great connections to the 7 billion or so the rest of us. How much are we losing by not having whatever it is they have to offer? To be able to connect that to this really big vision of bringing a whole bunch of people kind of in a different way into the world, I think is just really fantastic.
Bill, that's very kind of you to say so. And that's what the team is focused on, because bringing prosperity to those that need it in a simple term means getting them things they currently can't get, that they need at a cost they can afford. And that is the magic.
Well, that and again, maybe I'm adding this in, but I think it's implicit in that and giving them a way to put out into the world the things that are valuable to other people. There's always a return bit of the cycle.
Yeah, there is. And I mean, one of the discussions that, I was having up in the Orkney Islands, even over the last few days, is, of course, this is new jobs.
Yes.
The local community have an opportunity of building a new service based on their need that is ran by the local community, which means access to what they want at a price that previously they couldn't imagine and a shorter timeline that they couldn't have previously dreamed of, and actually operated by the local people in jobs that people will want to do.
New transportation links always mean social change.
They do.
So it's going to be really interesting to see how you and the competitors now and in future will bring to all of this. Both the technology you've talked about and the potential for making people's lives better is really exciting. So thank you for joining us.
Eldon, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Purposeful Strategist. In addition to being available on our website, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please do follow us and leave us a 5-star review. It helps others find the podcast. Thanks again, and join us soon for the next episode of The Purposeful Strategist.